Reality Transurfing by Vadim, Zeland. This book divides up the transurfing ideas into 78 bite-sized pieces. Transurfing is a potent instrument for constructing your own reality. Applying these fundamental ideas will give you the ability to alter your course in life. You can finish the course on creating your own reality in as little as 78 days, even if you are completely new to the transurfing ideas. The information you learn throughout the course will help you to see how deceptive the outside world is. As you apply the principles to your everyday life, you will come to understand that physical reality does not exist as a set phenomenon in and of itself. At each moment in time, from numerous possible decisions, you will learn how to make the one that will help you achieve your goals most effectively, and create a reality in alignment with the kinds of events that you decide do or do not have a place in your life. Idealists live in a fantasy world with their heads in the clouds. Materialists concentrate on conquering current challenges, which they tend to create themselves. Both kinds are unable of creating their own reality. With this practical course in transurfing, you have the chance to learn how to do just that. Basic principles. The mind interprets information using a collection of well-established labels. The soul doesn't think and doesn't speak, but it feels and knows. The mind is only able to create a relatively new version of a house made out of old bricks. Entirely new discoveries come from unrealized sectors. The soul serves as a mediator between entirely new information and the mind. The soul accepts unrealized information as knowledge without interpretations. If the mind is successful in interpreting the soul's information, a discovery is made. The mind is capable of unambiguously determining the state of inner comfort. Train yourself to pay attention to inner comfort. Having refused importance, you will get the freedom to choose your destiny. Freedom of choice allows you to stop asking, stop demanding, and to stop struggling. It allows you to go and take whatever you want. The structure of information is arranged into chains of cause and effect links. Cause and effect links give rise to the flow of variations. The paths of least resistance are arranged into separate streams. Streams in the flow of variations already have in themselves the solutions to all problems. Internal and external importance throws the mind out of the optimal stream. It is the mind which leads you to a waterfall, and not the streams in the flow of variations. Everything is a lot easier than it seems. Give in to this simplicity. It is not the omen that works, but your attitude to it. Guiding signs point at possible turns in the flow of variations. Life tracks differ qualitatively from one another. Signs put us on alert because they appear during a transfer to another life track. Signs can be distinguished by their ability to create a sensation that something is not quite right. Spontaneous phrases can be perceived as clear instructions, which you may act on. The condition of inner discomfort is a clear sign. If you have to talk yourself into something, it means the soul is saying no. If you have the possibility to refuse an uncomfortable decision, refuse it. It's necessary to loosen the grip and accept unforeseen events in your script. Importance gets in the way of your accepting the possibility of deviations in your script. The mind strives to control, not its own movement along the flow, but the flow itself. Move the center of gravity from control to observation. Having relinquished control, you will get real control over a situation. If you move along the flow of variations, the world will come out to greet you. Explanation. Since the beginning of time, people have been noticing that the world behaves in a dual way. On the one hand, all occurring on the material level is more or less understandable and explainable in terms of the laws of natural science. But on the other hand, when faced with phenomena belonging to the subtle level, these laws cease to be effective. Why can't we succeed in uniting the various manifestations of reality into one knowledge system? The result is a strange picture, as if the world plays hide and seek with the men and is unwilling to reveal its true nature. Scientists hardly succeed in formulating a law that explains a given phenomenon and another phenomenon appears, and it does not fit within the explanation of previous law. And this pursuit of truth, elusive as a shadow, continues forever. But here's something interesting: the world does not simply hide its real face, it readily accepts the appearance that people attribute to it, and this happens in all areas of natural science. For example, if we are to represent a given object from the micro-world as a particle, experiments have to be carried out in order to prove this. But in case we assume that this is not a particle but an electromagnetic wave, the world would not object and would readily manifest itself. The same would be the result if we would ask it about the matter from which it is made: is it a dense matter? It will answer, yes. And perhaps it is made of energy. The answer is again affirmative. As is known, a continuous process of birth and annihilation of microparticles takes place in the vacuum. Energy is converted into matter and vice versa. It's not worth it to even ask the world what is primary, matter or consciousness. It will again change its mask in a cunning way and turn to us exactly the side we would like to see. Representatives of various doctrines argue, proving contradicting viewpoints, but reality makes its impartial judgment. Actually, all of them are right. It turns out that not only the world is elusive but it's also yielding, and in other words, it behaves like a mirror. All concepts of reality are literally reflected by the world, whatever they might be. But are all attempts to explain the nature of reality in vain? Since the world will always agree with what we think about it, and at the same time it will always avoid a straightforward answer. In fact, things are much simpler. It is not necessary to seek absolute truth in the different manifestations of the diverse reality. All that you need to do is to accept the fact that just like a mirror, reality has two sides: physical, which can be touched with a hand, and metaphysical, which is beyond the borders of perception, but it's just as accurate. Today science explores what is reflected in the mirror, and the esotericism tries to look at the other side of the mirror. That's what their argument is all about. Yet, what is it there, on the other side of the mirror? As an esoteric teaching, Transurfing provides one of the possible answers to this question. On the other side of the mirror, there is the space of variations, an informational structure, in which the scenarios of all possible events are stored. The number of variants is endless, like the infinite number of positions of a point on the coordinate web. There, everything that was, that is and that will be, is stored. This means that the access to the space of variations opens opportunities for clairvoyance. The only problem is that an endless number of variations exist, thus events that will never happen can also be seen. That's why clairvoyants often make mistakes in their predictions, since they could see what never happened or would never happen. So, you can relax about that. Your future cannot be known by anyone, because no one can predict which variation will actually happen. Similarly, there is no guarantee that while dreaming, you see the exact sector in the space of variations, that is to become reality. And this is just great, as your future is not predetermined. This means that there is always hope for something better. The goal of Transurfing is not to remember the past with regret and to wait for tomorrow in fear, but to consciously form your reality. At first, it is hard to believe that. Where is located the space of variations? Is such a thing even possible? From the viewpoint of our three-dimensional perception, it is located everywhere and at the same time nowhere. It might be beyond the borders of the visible universe, or it might be located inside your cup of coffee. In any case, it is not in the third dimension. The paradox is that all of us go there every night. Dreams are not an illusion at all. People carelessly categorize them as fantasies, without suspecting that they reflect real events that might happen in the past or in the future. It is known that while dreaming, one can witness pictures that seem to belong to a world other than ours. And it is absolutely clear that such a thing is nowhere to be seen. If the dream is some sort of imitation of reality, generated by our brain, then where do all those unimaginable pictures and stories come from? If we assume that everything conscious in the human psyche belongs to the mind, and the subconscious, to the soul, it can be stated that the dream is the soul's flight in the space of variations. The mind does not invent the dreams, the mind really sees them. The soul has direct access to the informational field, where all scenarios and decors can be found stationary, like frames from a movie roll film. The time phenomenon manifests itself only when the movie roll film is moving. The mind is an observer and generator of ideas. Memory also is directly related to the space of variations. It's already proven that the brain is not physically able to store all the information one accumulates throughout his/her entire life. Then how does it manage to remember it? The answer is that the brain stores not the information itself, but something similar to addresses pointing to the data in the space of variations. People don't remember anything from their past lives because when the physical body dies, the addresses are destroyed. But under certain conditions, they can be restored. The mind is not able to create anything that is principally new. The mind can only construct a new version of a house using old blocks. All the material, for the scientific discoveries and the masterpieces of art, is provided to the mind from within the space of variations, with the help of the soul. And again, clairvoyance and intuitive knowledge come from there. Einstein wrote that, breakthroughs in science are not done through the way of logic, barely later, in the process of their representation, they are dressed in a logical form. Even the smallest discovery is always a revelation. The result comes from outside and is completely unexpected as if someone hinted it to you. The space of variation should not be mixed with the famous concept of a common informational field, in which data can be transmitted from one object to another. The space of variations is a stationary matrix, a structure, defining everything that could happen in our world. And so, if we put up with the simultaneous existence of the two sides of reality, a physical and a metaphysical one, the picture of the world becomes clearer. When those two aspects of reality touch each other on the surface of the mirror, phenomena occur that are related either to the paranormal or to still unexplained events. An illustrative example of such a touch of the two sides of reality is wave-particle duality when a microobject behaves both as a wave and a particle. Yet, we, the living beings, combining both materialistic and spiritual characteristics, represent the most amazing example. In a sense, we live on the surface of a giant dual mirror, on the one side of which is situated our material universe and on the other is situated the black infinity of the space of variations. Since we are situated in such a unique position, we would be at least short-sighted to live within the frames of the common world viewpoint and to use only one side of reality, the physical one. The thought power of a person, under given circumstances, is capable of materializing one or another sector of the space of variations. While being in the state, which Transurfing names as a union of mind and soul, an incredible magical power is created: the external intention. Everything, which we traditionally refer to as magic, has a direct relation to the external intention. With the help of that great power, the ancient magicians built the Egyptian pyramids and created other similar wonders. We call the intention external because it is located outside the person and thus it is not under the control of the mind. It is true that in a certain state of consciousness, one can gain access to it. When we submit that powerful force to our will, we will be able to do amazing things. Modern people thought have long ago lost their capabilities, while inhabitants of ancient civilizations such as Atlantis used to wield them. Parts of the ancient knowledge have reached us today in the form of esoteric teachings and practices, unrelated to each other. It's too hard to use those teachings in everyday life. Despite of the difficult practical realization, the secret to mastering the external intent lies on the surface. The key to revealing it lies in the phenomenon, which is known as lucid dreaming. During usual dreaming, the events happen independently from the will of the mind. Until the dreamers realize that they are sleeping, they aren't able to control what is happening in the dream. One is completely in the power of the unconscious dreaming, it just happens to him or her. But once one realizes that this is a dream, incredible capabilities are uncovered. In a conscious dream, anything can be accomplished. You can control events with the power of your intentions and can do unusual things like flying. The ability to control dreams appears when in your dream you realize the reality. On that step of awareness, one has a bearing point, the reality one can return to, after awakening. The reality, in its turn, also resembles an unconscious dream. One is in the power of circumstances and life just happens to him or her. People do not remember their past lives and have no bearing point to use it for going up to the next level of awareness. Despite all of the above, the situation is not hopeless. In transurfing there is another way around, which allows you to make the external intention serve you. People are able to form their reality. But to do that, they have to follow certain rules. The ordinary human mind unsuccessfully tries to impact the reflection in the mirror, when actually the image itself should be changed. The image is the direction and concept of human thinking. In order to turn your desires into reality, you need more than just desire. The image from the one side of the mirror should match certain parameters of the respective sector from the space of variations on the other side. But that is also not enough. We should know how to use the mirror, and it is not simple and it's too weird. Imagine the following unusual situation. You stand in front of the mirror and there is nothing, emptiness. After a while, a reflection starts to appear, like the exhibiting of photography. Then you start to smile, but in the reflection, you still see the same serious face. The mirror of the space of variations functions in the same way. Only the delay there is considerably longer, for which reason the changes cannot be perceived. The material realization is inert, but if certain conditions are met, the reflection will be shaped, meaning that the dream can become true. Your image in front of the mirror is an existing physical object. And your reflection, which is of no material substance, is alleged, metaphysical, but at the same time just as real as the image itself. Unlike the usual mirror, the material world manifests itself as a reflection, the images of which are the intention and thoughts of God, as well as of all living beings, His manifestations. The space of variations is a kind of matrix, a template, used for the tailoring, sewing, and demonstration of the models, the movement of all matter. The information about what and how things should occur in the material world is stored there. Every scenario is a sector of the space, containing the scripts and decors, the trajectory and shape of matter. In other words, the sectors define what must happen in every scenario and how it must look like. So, the mirror divides the world into two halves, valid and alleged one. Everything having a material shape is within the real half and it behaves according to the laws of natural science. Science and the usual world viewpoint are dealing only with what happens in reality. For reality we assume everything that can be observed and directly affected. If we reject the metaphysical side of reality and we only consider the material world, the actions of all living beings, including the human beings, will be brought down to a primitive movement within the frame of the internal intention. With its help, the goal is achieved through direct influence on the surrounding world. In order to achieve something, you need to make certain steps, to push forward, to work with your elbows, generally speaking, to do some specific job. Material reality reacts immediately to the direct influence, which creates the illusion that this is the only way you can get any results. However, within the frame of the material world, the circle of realistically achievable goals is significantly reduced. You have to rely only on that which is available. Everything comes down to means and possibilities, which are usually quite limited. In this world, absolutely everything is penetrated by the spirit of rivalry. Too many people want to achieve the same things. And within the frames of the internal intent, of course, there will not be enough for everybody. Besides, where are the conditions and circumstances going to come from, in order to achieve the goal? They can only come from the space of variations. On the other side of the mirror, everything is in excess, and without any competition. There are no commodities, but what is great is that you can choose any commodity as if choosing from a catalog, and order it. Sooner or later it will be delivered and you won't have to pay for it. All you have to do is fulfill certain, not too complicated conditions, and that's all. Doesn't that sound like a fairy tale? Not at all. Thought power does not disappear without any trace. It is capable of materializing that sector from the space of variations, which has parameters conforming to the mental broadcast. It just seems to us that all existing things in our world are a result of the interaction of material objects. Here, the processes on a fine level play a significant role, when the virtually existing scenarios manifest into reality. The cause-effect links of the fine processes are not always evident despite the fact they form at least half of our own reality. Usually, the materialization of the sectors of the space of variations happens independently from our will, because people do not focus their mental energy, let alone the less developed creatures. People have landed in real life, and they walk into a store with empty shelves, reaching out to commodities that have the sold out label. There are only low-quality stocks, but even for them, you need to pay a high price. And instead of just looking at the catalog and ordering, people jump into a chaotic search, wait in endless lines, with all strength try to skin through the crowd and quarrel with customers and sellers alike. Despite that, the objects of desire still don't fall into one's hands and the problems keep increasing. Such a tragic reality is at first born in the consciousness and gradually materializes itself and transitions into reality. Every living creature with its direct actions on one hand and thoughts, on the other hand, creates the layer of its own world. All layers are piled over one another, and thus every living being makes its contribution to the shaping of reality. The layer of the world is characterized by certain conditions and circumstances from which the way of life of the separate person is created. The vital conditions are different, comfortable or cruel, favorable or aggressive. Of course, the environment, in which a person is born, plays an important role. But later in life, in most cases, it depends on the attitude of that person towards themselves and the surrounding environment. People's view of the world to a great degree defines the subsequent changes in their way of living. That sector of the space of variations is materialized, the scenarios and decors of which match the direction and nature of the mental broadcasting. And so, two factors participate in the shaping of a given layer, on one side of the mirror, the internal intention, and on the other, the external one. With their direct actions, people can influence the objects of the material world, and with their thoughts, they can realize everything that still does not exist there. If a person is convinced that everything good in this world is already sold out, then that person will really encounter empty shelves only. If the person thinks that for good commodities, he or she has to wait in a long line and pay expensive prices, then it will be so. If his or her expectations are pessimistic and full of doubts, they will come true for sure. If he or she thinks that he or she will encounter an unfriendly circle of people, his or her feelings will come true. But if he or she has the innocent thought that the world has reserved for him or her all the best, which, inexplicably, will come true. That's how people form the layer of their world with their thoughts. But in most cases, they don't understand how this happens. People strive to have all things happen the way they want. They try to apply their simple principle to the world: whichever direction I turn, there I will go. If I push something hard at a specific place, there it will be bent. But who knows why, the world refuses to subdue. Something more, a person turns to one side, but the world takes this person to another. One should think, if reality behaves so inadequately, then a different approach is needed. Maybe reality subdues to other laws. But a person does not want to stop, to look around, and continues to stubbornly act his or her own way. After such work, one gets a layer of the world, where everything is as I didn't want it to be. On the contrary, a lot of things happen the way I did not want them to be. Some weird, freakish, contrary reality. Often we have the feeling as if the world deliberately messes with us. As if some unexplainable force attracts trouble to us. Our fears come true, our worst expectations happen. In reality, we are always haunted by that, which we hate and try to avoid. Why does it happen so? From the theory of transurfing, it is known why we happen to get what we do not want, especially if that aversion is barely containable. You are either afraid or hate something with your entire heart. Then the external intention will give you exactly that in excess. The mental energy, born from the union of mind and soul, turns the possibility into reality. In other words, the sector of the space of variations, the parameters of which match the mental broadcast, gets materialized, if your soul's feelings are in union with the thoughts of the mind. But that is not the only reason for the realization of the worst expectations. Generally put, a life without problems is normal. Everything plays out nice and smoothly, if you sail across the current of scenarios, without breaking the balance. Nature does not like to waste energy and does not strive to create intrigues. Unwanted circumstances and events occur because the unnecessary potentials import distortions into the surrounding energy image, and the attitudes of dependence make the problems deeper. Unnecessary potentials emerge when too much importance is attributed to some qualities. Relations of dependence between people are created when they compare themselves to others, confront each other and put conditions of the sort, if you do so, then I will. Unnecessary potential is not that scary till the distorted assessment exists on its own, without any relations to anything else. But when the artificially inflated assessment of one object is placed in comparison to another object, polarization occurs, which gives birth to the wind of the balancing forces. They strive to remove the emerged polarization and, in most cases, their action is directed against the creator of the distortion. Here are a few examples of potentials without a relation. I love you, I love myself, I hate you, I feel disgusted with myself, I'm good, you're bad. Such assessments are not based on contradictions. Here are examples of potentials that emerged from the relations of dependence. I love you if you love me, I love myself because I stand above you all, you are bad because I'm better. I don't like myself because I am the worst of all people, you are disgusting because you are not like me. The difference between the first group and the second one is very significant. The assessments based on comparison lead to polarization. The balancing forces remove this non-uniformity by colliding the opposites. The same way the opposite sides of a magnet attract each other. That's why troubles enter our lives so insistently and as if on purpose. For instance, married couples seemingly consist of two incompatible personalities, which are made as if to punish each other. In different teams, there will always be at least one person who will annoy you. The laws of Murphy are of the same nature. Polarization twists the energy image and gives birth to the wind of the balancing forces, as a consequence of which the reality is mirrored inadequately, as if by a cracked mirror. One does not understand that this occurs because he or she distorts the balance and tries to fight the surrounding world instead of removing the polarization. And all you have to do is simply follow the basic rule of transurfing. Allow yourself to be yourself and allow the others to be themselves. You must let go of the world and lose your grip. The more you stick to your desires and your pretensions, the more powerful the magnet that attracts everything opposite. What literally happens? You have grasped the world by its throat and the world resists, trying to break free. Pushing it and insisting is pointless, the situation will only worsen. Instead, you have to consciously change your attitude towards the situation according to the transurfing rule. By itself, the existence of the law of treachery is too weird, don't you agree? Why, for what reason does the world behave so nasty? Or those are all fabrications and prejudices? No, actually a certain tendency exists and you can't run away from that fact. Happily, the transurfing model not only reveals the cause for that law but also explains how to avoid it. The transurfing rule works flawlessly, by rescuing those who follow it from a mass of problems having an unknown origin. Once you loosen your grip and stop holding the world by its throat, the world right away starts behaving friendly and obediently. And the one who does not let go of the world will attract all negative things like a magnet. But the law of bad luck is not everything. Once opposites meet, their collision strives for later conflicts. We already explained the reason for the ubiquitous unity of opposites. By colliding them, the balancing forces restore the balance. And why are the opposing parties constantly fighting? At first glance, it should be the opposite, to face, extinguish each other and settle down. But no, opposites will annoy each other until they start fighting, and if no one breaks them apart, this will continue forever. There are ample examples. You, yourselves, can confirm that the world quite often annoys you. Of course, it's different for everybody and to a different degree. But in general, the essence is, if in the current moment, something can tip you off balance, it will happen as if deliberately. The following happens: if you are bothered by something, your nerves are tensed, at least to some extent. As if in relation to that, a spider appears and starts to jump and bark, thus tensing your nerves even more. You are annoyed and the spider keeps jumping higher and higher. There are a lot of ways to increase the tension. Let's suppose that you are rushing to get somewhere and you are afraid that you might be late. The spider claps and then, rubbing its hands, exclaims, "Go, and go, our team." From this moment on, everything works against you. People will be in your way and will walk slower and you will not be able to get around them. You have to go through the door as soon as possible, and in front of it, there is a whole big line of lazy people who barely walk. It happens with the cars on the road. As if everyone has conspired against you. Of course, some of that happens because of the perceptions. When you are in a rush, it seems that the whole world is slower. But there are obvious signs. The elevator or the car breaks down, the bus is late. You end up in a traffic jam. Now there's definitely some ill-intentioned objectivity. We could also give other examples. If you are worried or stressed out by something, the people around you will do just that, which bothers you, and at the exact moment, you want to be left alone. The kids annoy you. Despite that, they behaved a minute ago. Someone starts to chew and swallow loudly. You get obstacles coming from everywhere. If you wait for someone without any patience, the person comes late. If you don't want to see anyone, someone will come right away. And so forth. And this external push gets more intense, as more tension accumulates. The stronger it is, the more actively are the others bothering you. But here's something interesting: they do not behave this way deliberately. They don't even think about it, that they are bothering someone. What is the reason for such behavior? In the psychology of the unconscious, there are many white spots. As weird as it is, in most cases, people are driven by unconscious motives. But what is amazing does not lie in that, but in the moving force, which is forming the unconscious motives, and which is not within the human psyche but outside it. That force consists of the invisible but realistic energy informational entities created by the mental energy of living beings, the pendulums. The pendulums always appear where they can feed on the energy of conflicts. We shouldn't assume that these entities are capable of plotting something and to realize conscious intent. Just like leeches, the pendulums can sense polarization as a non-homogeneity of the energy field and they strive to attach themselves there. But that is not that scary. What is terrible is that they not simply absorb the energy of the conflict, but they somehow make the people behave in such a way as to give out more energy. The pendulums do that so that they have an abundance of energy. They pull people with invisible strings and people obey like puppets. For them the clear human consciousness is inaccessible, but that is not necessary. all they require is the subconscious. Usually, all people are sleeping in real life. One does a lot of things automatically, without thinking. The level of awareness is especially low when a person is at home or in a crowd. In a home environment, the need for increased self-control is not high, so that's why one relaxes and almost naps. In an external, but narrow circle of conversation, on the contrary, the consciousness is the most active and it's busy with self-control. While in a big public gathering, the actions of the separate person again become spontaneous, and they also fall into a strong correlation with the general impulse of the masses. In order to demonstrate the work of the pendulum, let's take the simplest example, a passerby, which you want to outwalk. When you decide to go around to the left, he makes a spontaneous move to the left, as if he's deliberately standing in your way. You try to go to the right and he unconsciously goes in the same direction. What makes the passerby shift his direction? He does not see you, nor does he care that you want to outwalk him. Maybe he somehow senses with his back that you are approaching and instinctively does not want to let his competitor go ahead. At first glance, this is the explanation, and still it's not like that. If we are talking about instincts, in nature rivalry always occurs when the opposing parties face each other. The pendulum, that's what makes the passerby shift his way. A person walks, without thinking about where they step, so that they can move forward. In that relation one is sleeping. That's why the line of one's steps from time to time shifts away to one side or the other. The motivation, that is, the choice of direction, is situated in the subconscious that in this moment is not controlled, and it is potentially open to the pendulum. You show up and try to outwalk him. In fact, that is a conflict, even though a minor one. In order to increase it, the pendulum makes the passerby do an unconscious shift in order to get in the way and to sharpen the situation. At the same time, it does not do that on purpose, because it does not have conscious intent. And again, unconsciously, the balancing forces do their job. Once again we stress this, it is about processes the mechanism of which currently is not clear, and we don't speak about conscious behavior. We are only marking the separate manifestations and laws of the nature of the energy informational world. There is no point in discussing how the pendulum works in a given situation, where it came from, or how it manages to do that, and what actually is happening there at an energy level. The only thing that matters is one basic conclusion: if the balancing forces clash with the opposites, the pendulums do everything to increase the energy of the conflict that has arisen. That is the law of the pendulum. The endless battles of the pendulums, whether family scandals or armed conflicts, are all happening according to this law. When a clash emerges, the events will develop towards the sharpening of the conflict, no matter what happens, including the temporary and decorative peace treaties. Common sense is not available when the law of the pendulum is at work. That's why the actions of individual people, as well as entire countries, very often do not fit within the frame of common sense. In a conflict situation, human motives are under the control of the pendulum. The result is a strange effect: you perceive your past actions like a dream. What was I thinking? Why did I do that? Because the person acted, without accounting for it. Barely later, when the consciousness is no longer under external influence, a person adequately evaluates what happened. Couples argue and split up because they are convinced that they are incompatible. But they did have happy moments when everything was just great. And all of a sudden, a person changes and starts behaving in a hostile way. This does not match at all with his or her previous behavior. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? In reality, the reason is not that one or another person has changed. One can behave in a way unacceptable to the partner because that's how the pendulum makes him or her act. It rules the subconscious motivation of the people opposing each other. And that control is oriented towards increasing the energy of the conflict. People cannot realize that they are forced to confront others. People can act in an absolutely illogical and inadequate manner. This effect is particularly dear in cases of unexplainably cruel crimes. Later, when the subject is on trial, while remembering his or her past actions in bewilderment, it was like my conscience was in a fog. A person does not lie, it was really that way. For the criminals themselves, this act is completely unexpected, and they may perceive it as a terrifying dream. The dream becomes particularly strong if attention falls under the hoop of obsession. In specific societies, like in the army, in a group or a sect, an environment is created with defined stereotypes of behavior and thinking that makes the subconscious sleepy, and it is completely open to the zombie effect of the pendulum. Then things might happen, which if looked upon from an aside, seem absolutely crazy. Why do people so fiercely kill their own kind? Because they, the others, bow down to others, and not their own gods. Who does this bother? People endure the privations of war and die with the dozens, hundreds of thousands, millions. Where is the survival instinct? To a certain degree, we can understand the battles for riches or territory. But how do we explain the battles for beliefs? The idea of peace is close to everyone. But wars do not end. The idea of one God is obvious. Ideas for brotherhood, justice, and equality, we can continue with an endless list. Everyone understands everything, but common sense is absent, and evil wins. The universal source of evil, the pendulums. When we observe it for a while, it becomes absolutely clear, whatever you do in whatever conflict of one thing with another, everything is pointed towards increasing the energy of the conflict. Even if the fight stops for a while, that doesn't last long, and later it emerges with new power. Of course, there are all kinds of pendulums, and they are destructive to a different extent. Many are quite harmless. For instance, the pendulum of transurfing is needed so that as many people as possible can think about what happens in reality. We are not talking about releasing yourself from all pendulums, if that is even possible. The main thing is not to be a puppet and to act consciously in order to use these structures to your advantage. How to break out of that influence? Wake up and realize in what way the pendulum is trying to manipulate you. When you realize what's going on, half the job is done. The power of the pendulum's influence is inversely proportional to the awareness. It has power over you only while you sleep in real life. Before all, do not participate in the destructive battles of the pendulums, if you personally do not need them. When you are in a crowd, you have to step down from the scene in order to look around and wake up. What am I doing here? Do I realize what I am doing? Why do I need this? The awakening from the lucid dream must be absolutely clear, as we mentioned earlier. In this moment I no longer sleep, and I clearly realize what I am doing, why, and for what reason it is so. If you realize that, things will be all right. If not, then in every, even minor situation you are a puppet. It's more complicated when something annoys you. In this situation, the spider will jump, while the tension exists. Usually, this means that the pendulum has obsessed your attention. In order to free yourselves from it, you need to become carefree. It might be difficult. The same is valid for all other situations. When the spider jumps, this means your attention is obsessed. You have been pulled into the game of the pendulum, whose goal is to increase the energy of the conflict. To liberate yourself from that hook, you need to focus your attention on something else. Generally speaking, things aren't that bad. Things will be okay if you don't sleep in real life. Although you may think that everything set up to this point is some kind of fairy tale, and of course, it is not easy to get used to the thought that some entities do control you. To accept this knowledge or not, it's a matter of personal choice. And you don't have to believe it. Observe and make your own conclusions. Best of luck.